Just a soccer dad in khakis, fed up with crime and chaos. It's all bull. A costume, a political drag show. He's the classic wolf in sheep's hair gel.
The studio erupted with laughter, but beneath the crude humor lay something devastating: the systematic dismantling of a political career built on lies. This wasn't just another late-night monologue. It was a public execution, wrapped in punchlines. Gavin Newsom had finally pushed too far. For years, he presided over California's descent into chaos with the smugness of a man who believed himself untouchable. The tent cities, the needles in playgrounds, the human feces mapped on smartphone apps. All of it happened under his watch, under his policies, under his perfectly coiffed hair. But now, sensing the political winds shifting, he'd done what every desperate politician does. He pretended to discover the problem he created.
But as always, when a far-left Dem runs for national office, he acts like a Republican. This is where the left is really pro-trans. Suddenly, they grow balls.
The metaphor landed like a grenade. That's exactly what Newsom was attempting: a complete political transformation. The progressive champion of sanctuary cities was now cosplaying as a law and order centrist. The architect of California's humanitarian disaster was suddenly fed up with the very crisis he engineered. It was theatrical, it was transparent, and it was about to get shredded.
So Newsom is fed up with tent cities, the crime, the urban decay? No, he's not mad about that stuff. He's mad you noticed.
There it was, the entire con exposed in one sentence. Newsom didn't have a come-to-Jesus' moment. He had a come-to-polling data moment. The homeless weren't suddenly more desperate. The voters were suddenly more angry.
It's like a criminal telling a jury he's sorry he robbed 25 banks when he's just sorry he got caught on the 26th. Because this isn't some spontaneous crisis. This is a man-made disaster like Chernobyl or Fox
This
and
wasn't
Friends.
an act of God. This was policy. This was choice. This was Gavin Newsom looking at mentally ill drug addicts and deciding the compassionate thing was to let them die slowly on sidewalks.
And the man who made it acts like he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It's pure government grift, shoving you down a flight of stairs and then making you pay for the handrail.
The metaphor captured the scam perfectly. Democrats created the crisis, then demanded more money to fix it, all while blaming everyone else. It was the perfect perpetual motion machine of government failure. And the lie they sold, the big, beautiful lie.
We've been lied to for years that homelessness is all about affordable housing. Fentanyl isn't the problem. It's that loan officer at the bank.
Affordable housing. The magic phrase that absolved progressive politicians of responsibility. If only we built more units. If only we taxed the rich more, then somehow the zombie apocalypse on Skid Row would transform into a thriving community. It was always nonsense. But saying so made you heartless. So the lie persisted while people rotted in the streets.
Yet as we walked to work, we never saw families or kids, just men. So strung out on fentanyl, they looked like they were playing Twister without a mat. Affordable housing won't change that. Give them a house, they'll burn it down when they pass out holding a crack pipe.
The visual was grotesque because the reality was grotesque. These weren't families down on their luck. These were severely mentally ill addicts who needed forced treatment. But admitting that would require admitting the entire progressive framework was wrong. So they kept lying, and the bodies kept piling up.
See, to the Dems, the homeless were always victims, and they are, of Democrats. The people in these encampments are mentally ill, addicted, sometimes violent, often incapable of basic hygiene, let alone stable living. Imagine a commune, but everyone works at MSNBC.
The comparison captured the delusional thinking that created this nightmare. Progressive politicians looked at human wreckage and saw noble savages who just needed affirmation. They looked at addiction and saw self-medication. They looked at chaos and saw liberation. It was ideological madness, dressed up as compassion.
You know, it didn't used to be that way. When we were growing up, we called the homeless hobos. They were rare, colorful characters carrying their prized possessions in a bindle, drinking Mad Dog 2020, and wearing Michael Dukakis for President t-shirts.
There was genuine nostalgia there. The hobos of old America were eccentric outsiders who chose a different path. They were human, individual, memorable. What California created was different. It was industrial-scale human degradation.
But then it changed. Hobos became the homeless. A protected class given victim status, which became an incentive for people to migrate towards busy areas to mingle with the normies immune from the law, which made it worse because contempt for these folks only grew with more contact.
Protected class status. That was the poison pill. Once homelessness became an identity with special rights, the incentive structure flipped entirely. Being visibly homeless in a major city came with benefits. No laws applied, advocates rushed to your defense, and a sprawling non-profit industrial complex existed solely to keep you in your current state.
Have you ever taken your mom shopping at Embarcadero Center on her birthday and watched a man defecate in front of her? I did. And that man was Brian Kilmeade.
The laughter came again, but the underlying point was dead serious. These were daily indignities inflicted on normal citizens. Parents couldn't take children to parks. Women didn't feel safe walking to work. Businesses closed because customers stopped coming. And through it all, Gavin Newsom smiled his perfect smile and blamed everyone but himself.
But common sense says that you put these people in treatment and then return the streets of San Fran to the folks who made them famous, cross-dressing hookers.
Even the solution was delivered with dark humor, but the message was clear. San Francisco could handle eccentric. It couldn't handle apocalyptic. The city's legendary tolerance was for the weird, not the dangerous. Newsom had crossed that line and kept driving.
It's like the wildfires. Gavin blames climate change when it was his corrupt bureaucracy. Since the Palisades fire, which destroyed 6,000 buildings, only 4 permits have been issued for rebuilding. Did climate change cause that? Hell no. So like the fires,
there was the pattern. Blame the abstract, the uncontrollable. Never blame the actual policies, the actual regulations, the actual bureaucratic incompetence that turned manageable problems into catastrophes.
Newsom let homelessness run wild. He allowed tens of billions of dollars to be swallowed up by a maze of consultants, nonprofits, and bureaucrats who created poop mats.
Poop mats. Let that sink in. California spent tens of billions of dollars, and the signature achievement was maps tracking human feces, not solutions, not treatment. Maps of shit.
It's sad. Californians used to sell maps of celebrity homes, not landmines. Now, instead of sightseeing, tourists play hopscotch so their shoes don't get hepatitis.
The transformation was complete. The Golden State had become a third-world pestilence zone where disease-tracking apps were essential survival tools. And the man who presided over this decline wanted to be president. The nerve was breathtaking.
And when residents complain, they're called cruel. And now we're supposed to believe Gavin? Hell no. All the problems of the last decade were based on his...
Cruel. That was always the trump card. If you objected to needles in playgrounds, you were cruel. If you didn't want aggressive, mentally ill people screaming at your children, you were cruel. This moral blackmail sustained the entire system.
And his party's lies. A man can grow his hair out and play girls' sports. A gangbanger can claim he's oppressed. That homeless junkie, he's just an out-of-work artist.
The lies cascaded, creating a reality distortion field where nothing meant what it appeared to mean. Words lost connection to truth. Categories dissolved. Common sense became hate speech.
Newsom wasn't just ignoring the problem, he enabled it because Dems were in a woke crouch, terrified of their loony base. But now that he's seeing the White House, he's got a brand new act, a common sense centrist.
Woke crouch. The phrase captured the submissive posture of progressive politicians who spent years genuflecting to their most deranged activists. They didn't lead, they cowered. But national politics required a different costume.
And the kids this drag queen is reading to are the gullible voters.
Political drag show. The metaphor was devastating because it was perfect. Newsom was performing masculinity, performing moderation, performing concern. None of it was real. It was all costume, all act, all cynical repositioning for higher office. And then came the evidence. Rolling tape of Newsom in action doing what he does best, performing concern while offering nothing. A female panelist cut through the performance with lived experience.
All right, next question.
Yes, Governor. People are calling you Greasy Gavin. Why do you think that is?
Look, I appreciate that question. I want to tell you, I've been taking fewer showers lately, and I think people have been noticing.
Her voice carried the weight of loss, of something beautiful destroyed. This wasn't conservative talking points. This was someone who loved San Francisco, who embraced its diversity, who made it her home, and then watched it die.
That, all right? Fewer showers, shorter showers. We want to save water here in California. We want to keep those reservoirs filled up because I don't know if you...
The indictment was personal now, delivered by someone who witnessed the transformation firsthand, not from cable news, but from walking those streets every single day.
Is when a tourist in my neighborhood would give money to a homeless guy, and then they go back to Nebraska or Arizona and feel good about themselves. But that just made sure that that homeless guy is going to stay on my street. They don't understand that you're feeding the problem.
She understood what coastal progressives refused to admit. Compassion without boundaries wasn't compassion. It was enablement. Those tourists buying moral absolution for $5 were ensuring more suffering, more degradation, more death. But they got to feel good, and that was what mattered.
And ironically that you said that, because when I was subjected to Newsom as mayor when I lived in San Francisco, remember he had the Care Not Cash program.
Yes.
And his whole point was, no, let's actually not spend money.
Here was the beautiful irony. Young Newsom actually implemented a sensible policy once. Care Not Cash. Provide services instead of handouts. Get people treatment instead of enabling addiction. It was brilliant because he didn't think of it. And then he betrayed
But
it.
here's the thing. It was actually in concept a brilliant plan because he didn't think of it. It was his campaign manager's idea. And that was before Gavin Newsom then slept with his wife.
The personal betrayal mirrored the policy betrayal. Newsom took another man's idea, took another man's wife, and discarded both when convenient. It was character revelation through anecdote.
Like people who have memories, who remember his decades tenure of being born with a silver spoon, pretending he's not, sharing all the donor monies of the 5 families, and then leaving an imprint of colossal feces in California. Those of us who grew up with him.
Colossal feces.
Yes, we've been subjected to it
Born
this
with
whole
a
time.
silver spoon. That was the other lie Newsom tried to sell. He positioned himself as a scrappy reformer when he was actually California aristocracy connected to the Getty family, swimming in old money and older connections. He didn't build anything. He inherited a kingdom and burned it down.
But he has spent, historically, there is no one that has spent more money on the homeless, and yet with such a meteoric rise on the homeless.
The damning statistic. Maximum spending, maximum failure. Billions of dollars disappeared, and the only thing that grew was the problem itself.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. He, this entire time, has been obviously playing, he's been reading the room. So when his world was just California, it was just San Francisco, he was as radical as it gets. Just California, radical as it gets. But now that he's eyeing the whole full geography of the United States.
Reading the room. That's all Newsom ever did. He was a weather vane, not a leader. Whichever way the wind blew, that's where he pointed. San Francisco wanted radical. He gave them radical. National electorate wants moderate. He'll cosplay moderate. None of it was principle. All of it was performance.
Then he's like, okay, I gotta be mainstream, but it's the mainstream media that is paving the way for that. That says, oh yes, we'll forgive you. Yep, so now Newsom is the centrist. Like, they will forget the past, even though we won't.
There was the real scandal. Media complicity. The same outlets that would never let a Republican pivot were ready to grant Newsom absolution. His record would be memory hold. His failures forgotten. His reinventions celebrated as evolution, but not everyone was buying it. Another voice jumped in, cutting through with simple questions.
I'm confused. He's still governor, right?
Yes.
So he could do something about it. That's the most irritating thing, is that why did anyone say with a follow-up where he's like, the homeless situation is ridiculous? Follow-up question, aren't you the governor?
The emperor had no clothes, and someone finally said it. Newsom was currently, presently, right now the governor of California. He had power. He had authority. He had the ability to actually do something, but he wouldn't, because the policies he championed created this disaster, and reversing them would mean admitting he was wrong.
That's the difference between the radical left and President Trump. He'll talk about something as it's being taken care of. He's going to go up and say, listen, I'm going to sign an executive order to stop homelessness, and here's how we're going to do it. Bam, 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 done. The border, done. 5 days later, 99%, no one's crossed.
The contrast was stark. Action versus talk. Results versus rhetoric. One philosophy believed government could solve problems through decisive intervention. The other believed government could solve problems by talking about solving problems while making them worse.
There's a problem. This is what we saw this in New York when he put, what's his name, that Blasio, the guy you really hate.
Yeah, Bill de Blasio.
He put his wife in charge of the homeless, and there's $50 million still missing?
Yeah.
$50 million. Just gone. Vanished into the progressive nonprofit void. No accountability, no investigation, no consequences. Taxpayer money flowed to connected insiders who produced nothing while claiming to help. It was a money laundering operation disguised as compassion.
So this is another one of the left's money schemes where the guy who's in charge is saying, we need help, we need to figure out a way to do this. So they're going to make a committee.
Committee. The word carried the weight of futility. Another commission, another task force, another panel that would study the problem, hold hearings, issue a report, and change nothing. Meanwhile, the tent cities would grow.
They already have bubonic plague in California. I remember Dr. Drew was going, there's bubonic plague back in California. Wow. I grew up in California. I will not bring my kids back to my neighborhood because I don't feel like walking through, as you affectionately call, hobos, drug addicts and pedophiles and criminals who hide there because it's a great place to hide and commit crimes.
Bubonic plague. Medieval diseases returning to America's wealthiest state. A man who grew up there refusing to let his children visit. This wasn't hyperbole. This was California under Gavin Newsom. The final verdict came with brutal simplicity.
So he could do something. He doesn't want to do something. He's just saying to see if American people are stupid enough to fall for his.
Yeah.
There it was. The bottom line. The ultimate exposure. Newsom wasn't trying to fix anything. He was testing whether voters were dumb enough to believe his pivot. It was contempt masquerading as concern, manipulation masquerading as moderation, and the entire performance had been dissected, analyzed, and rejected on national television. Gavin Newsom came to sell a new image and left in pieces. His record was read. His transformation was rejected. His ambitions were exposed. The tent cities of California stood as monuments to his failure. The disease outbreaks, the crime waves, the exodus of residents fleeing to other states, all of it testified against him. He'd had years to fix it. He'd had billions to spend. He'd had total control of state government. And he'd chosen this. Every single day, he chose this. Now he wanted credit for finally noticing the disaster he created. He wanted applause for pretending to care. He wanted the White House as a reward for destroying California. The answer from everyone who'd actually lived through his governance was the same. Hell no. Somewhere in Sacramento, in the carefully staged governor's office with the perfect lighting and the carefully selected books on the shelves, Gavin Newsom was probably still smiling that smile. Still convinced his looks and his spin and his media allies would carry him through. But outside those walls, on the streets he'd abandoned and the sidewalks he'd surrendered, reality told a different story. A story of failure so complete, so undeniable, that no amount of hair gel could obscure it. This wasn't politics anymore. This was a reckoning. And California's glossy-haired governor had just learned that reinvention requires people forgetting the past. But the past was sleeping on every corner, shooting up in every alley, defecating on every sidewalk. You can't memory hole an apocalypse. You can only own it. And Gavin Newsom owned every inch of California's collapse. The exposure was complete. The verdict was in. The would-be president had been revealed as the disaster he always was. And no amount of moderate cosplay would change that.